Let me begin with a question. What is the most powerful technology in the world? Is it genetics? I hear they can put a human ear on a mouse. That's pretty cool. Is it space travel? Well, that's right up there. But these days, the answer is always artificial intelligence. Now, what's your question? I would suggest to you that actually the most powerful technology in the world is the oldest technology in the world, the story. Think about what stories do. They tell us what's possible, what's impossible, what we want to do, what we should do, how to navigate that future. Well, one of the oldest stories in the world and the most powerful story in the world is, you ready for this? Old age is made up. Yes, indeed, it is made up. I want you to think about it, not about the months and the years and whatnot that you gather, but how you think about old age is made up. British medical science in the late 1800s, early 1900s came up with an idea called vital force, vital energy. And the idea was that you were born, in fact, you were imbued with a certain amount of energy. And over time, as you used it to work or do anything, and frankly, anything fun, you would drag it down. You would no longer be, shall we say, a glass half full, you would be a glass half empty. But stories do something else other than explain things. We begin to believe them with such power that they give us vocabulary. They create institutions. So let's see, if you were too tired to work because you were draining down your vital energy, you would have to what? Well, remember, work in the 1800s, early 1900s was labor, physical labor. And so if you were too tired to work, you would have to withdraw. You would have to retire. And by the way, if you didn't have a family to support you, because remember, there were no pensions, no Social Security, if you did not have a family to protect you, we created other institutions. They were overwhelmingly called poor homes, alms homes, which were overwhelmingly populated by older people. But here's the thing you don't think about. We go from retired, tired, alms homes, poor homes, senior homes, rest homes, in a nice linear line to funeral homes. So you see, that story, if you will, is so powerful that it's not just in the West, it's not just in North America or Europe, it's around the world. And as a result, whether you're a policymaker, an economist, doctor, anyone else, we no longer see aging, or that is living longer, as the greatest success of humankind, but instead we see it as a problem to be solved rather than an opportunity to be won. Ladies and gentlemen, the longevity economy is about translating 20, 30, 40 years of added years of life from the year 1900 into a longevity dividend to be cashed in to live longer and better. Stories matter, though. They kind of frame how we look at the world. I mean, think about the fact, when you think about older adults, how often do you see products or services or, frankly, movies that talk about fun, fashion, friends, and, heaven forbid, sex? The fact of the matter is these stories limit our creativity. In fact, let me give you an example. Heinz Senior Foods created a baby food for older adults because this billion-dollar company with lots of research, lots of PhDs said, well, okay, older adults, they don't have teeth. Apparently they don't have taste. I know, we'll create Heinz Senior Foods. Well, needless to say, that mush crashed and burned. How about this little device? All of us know these devices that our parents, grandparents may have been given. The help, I've fallen, I can't get up. Personal emergency response systems. Here's the thing. Products don't just do things for you. Products say something about you. And only 35% of people that my lab surveyed that are 75 and older think they're older. But I have to tell you, 100% of the people who've got something on their jacket that say it's about, I'm an old man about to fall down, they know they're 100% older. By the way, we don't know whether this is a remote control or a self-defense device. The fact of the matter is that when we think of old age and we think about design and we think about new ideas, for some reason it's always big, beige, and boring. But old age is not what it used to be. Older adults today worldwide now have more education than any time in history. By the way, education does not necessarily make you smart, but it does give you chronic attitude. And we start to see that with older adults and, frankly, all of us. Do you know that the digital divide, we often think of older adults, oh, they don't like technology. Well, guess what? Do you know that older adults today around the world are now competing with Wii video games and the like with such verve that a whole medical condition called Wii wrist and Wii elbow has been developed because they're hurting ligaments and blowing out arms and the like. And it's not just about their numbers. It's not just about the education. It's not just about technology. But as I coin it, the longevity economy. The 60-plus worldwide control 30% of the world's spending power. That's the third largest economy after the gross domestic product of the United States and China, and then the longevity economy. This is not necessarily your grandparents' old age. And let me ask you a couple questions. Are we as polite and as patient as our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents? I would submit to you that the new generation gap is about expectations. That previous generations believed that over time, quality of life was going to decline, whether it was money or connection or purpose and the like. But the next generation, all of you, all of us, believe there's a pill, a product, or a policy that is going to make it possible, not just for me to live longer, because we all know we're not going to get out alive, but we do believe that there's going to be something to make my older age better than what my parents had. And that gap, that expectation, is the white space of the longevity economy for innovation across government, business, and the like. But if you're going to live that long, I say we should have a good time doing it. 100 years of quality living. You know, we're really good at creating stories. I want you to think about this. Do you know that in the 1700s, or until the 1700s, a child or children were not cute little things. They were considered vile little creatures. They were small adults that should be hidden because they had no judgment. They did terrible things. And then we invented children, saying, oh, no, okay, they're cute. Do you know the phrase or the word toddler, the 2, 3, 4-year-old toddler, did not exist until the 1800s. And then we created the most dangerous thing on the planet, second to any weapon system that was ever invented. We invented the teenager. Adolescence was not around until, believe it or not, the early 1900s. See, our life stages and what we think we're going to be doing are actually social artifacts that we create and then we reinforce, and somehow we start to believe that they are as sound as Newtonian physics. Okay, look at these kids. Aren't they cute? Come on, they're cute, right? Do you know why they're cute? They're not teenagers yet. That is why they're cute. But I want you to think about this. 1/2 the children born in the 1990s and early 2000s around the industrialized world, 1/2 of them are forecasted to live 100 years. Start thinking about what that means. It does not necessarily mean more time in retirement. It means we have to start asking smarter questions. Stop asking your children and your grandchildren, what are you going to be when you grow up, when the question should be, how many things will you be when you grow up? Do you genuinely believe that getting an education from someone that looks like me is going to last you for a work life that's going to go 20, 30, 40, 50, and some have suggested a 60-year work life? Not necessarily in the same job, but many different things. Will my wife of nearly 40 years want to hear the same jokes from me over and over again? We don't know. But what we're doing is we're creating new life stages in that time. We're either taking our time with what we do, or we're creating something entirely new. There's a whole literature out there now called emerging adulthood. Now, many of us may recognize this, but emerging adulthood is basically that when you become an adult is getting older and older and older. A few decades ago, if you were 18, your parents, they loved you. They would say, you're 18, get a job, go to college, join the military, get married, but what? Get out! And then a few years later, the 20s came, well, you're only in your 20s, take your time, whatever else. But emerging adulthood, not just here in Europe, not just in North America, but it's also called waithood in Africa and Asia. Now adulthood is being said to start in your mid-30s. In fact, some are saying 36 as an adult. I was already bald, had a marriage, a mortgage, and a daughter named Mary, and I was just a baby. I had no idea. But if we start pushing out adulthood, we're pushing out other things. Do you know there's something out there called celibacy syndrome, where adults under the age of 40 do not wish to be touched? Now look, I'm not a biologist, but I think that's going to hurt the fertility rate in general. And by the way, speaking of that, nearly 40% of young adults under the age of 35 live by themselves, and by the way, have no partner, no spouse, and frankly, they're reporting no friends with benefits. And as a result, we're seeing all these different life stages push out or entirely new ones created. In fact, the only group of women showing an increase in having children are women over the age of 40. And start thinking about what that means. If you have your first child after the age of 40, chances are it's going to be one and done. But we're also creating new things as well. As an academic, I always thought that sabbaticals were all about my career. But now midlife crisis is about having micro-retirements, sabbaticals to renew, to replenish, to change careers. All of a sudden now we're going to have to start thinking about financial products, not to finance college for your kids, but to finance your college and change of career overall. So renewal may come from taking time off and rethinking, but renewal can also come from something else. The highest divorce rate in the world is amongst the 50 plus, so-called gray divorce. Why would you give up this big hunk of man after all? And the number one person to initiate the divorce is a woman. And many of the women will answer this question, why would you give up? After all, he's a pet lover. The number one answer is, he bores me. What we're finding is that in the longevity economy, the future indeed is female. In fact, if we start looking at older women over the age of 50, do you know that they're the second largest group of people starting new businesses in the United States? 35% of the new high-tech businesses in China. And in the UK, women now outpace men in earnings overall and starting new businesses. So indeed, the new women's movement is entrepreneurship, but in older age. And yes, many of us will go back to work. We may retire. No one said that you want to stay with the same job that you've been for 10, 20, 30 years. But what we often find is after about 18 months, people go back to work, either part-time, or what we find is that older people are getting to be like young people. Everybody wants to have a gig, even if it's only part-time and flexible. But let's do some quick math with you. I want you to get an idea of how much time we're talking about. Do you know that from birth to 21 years old, or as we like to say in the United States, drinking age, is about 8,000 days? Do you know that from drinking age, 21, to midlife crisis, that 46, 47 years old period, is 8,000 days? Now, I bet a few of you are quantitative jocks and you're getting the algorithm. And from midlife crisis to 65, or that retirement age, guess what? That's another 8,000 days. But here's the thing. The fastest growing part of the population worldwide, let alone in the industrialized West, is 85 and change. And from 65 to 85 and change is, you guessed it, another 8,000 days. So if I take 0 to 21, I gently move that off to the side, and I call that youth or childhood or something like that. All of a sudden now retirement is not a short trip on a cruise or health or going to Disney or something like that. No, what we currently call retirement is effectively 1/3 of adult life. So how do we cash in that longevity dividend? What is the new story we need to write? Because as you can see, all of these things are not, shall we say, ordained by physics. They're created by all of us. First, infrastructure we need to change. I want you to think about longevity infrastructure and stories we need to change. The first one is the social infrastructure. Why do we have to retire at Friday at 5 o'clock and then Monday we're going, okay, now what? Why don't we start to make a transition period of mentorship or flexibility so that there's an easing out the door, so to speak, to your next future? How about downsizing? A lot of people downsize from their homes. Why isn't there a downsizing party for older adults? There are baby showers, there are wedding showers, but why aren't there grandparent showers? You see, these are all created to give us something to look forward to in that 65 plus, 85 plus. Because right now, there's nothing for you other than large birthdays and retirement parties. How about rethinking our institutions, the infrastructure of our institutions? Think about education. Education now is going to have to be for a lifetime. Start thinking about how technology has changed radically, how AI has disrupted professions such as even computer science majors in the United States now are among the high unemployed in the US. Why? Because AI is writing their programs for them right when they get out of school. Knowledge is doubling at such a rate where, frankly, your doctor, medical knowledge now is doubling anywhere from 18 to 48 months. Start thinking about every profession that has to be changed or retrained overall. And speaking of institutions, rethinking work. We now have not just one generation, a younger and older generation. We have an older generation, a younger generation, but guess what? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, you could argue as many as 5 or 6 generations under the roof of the workplace. How do you manage? How do you engage? How do you make them all productive when they all may want something else? We have to be prepared that the new kid interviewing for the job at your company or your organization, the new kid is going to be 60 years old. But guess what? The new kid is also going to have to appreciate that the new boss is going to be 25 years old. Finally, think about the infrastructure itself, the built environment. How do we rethink our communities, the places and the spaces that we live, we work, play, and provide care, not just to make them age-friendly, but to be age-ready? And please, I don't want technology and environments that are big, beige, and boring under the spirit, well, they're accessible. No, in the longevity economy, in longevity, we want to have environments that excite and delight across the lifespan overall. This brings me back to the story. I want you to think about, again, the power of story. I want to invite all of you, frankly, all of us, to invent a new story in the place where storytelling was born, in the place where storytelling was raised to mythical proportions. A story of how do we live longer and better lives. Thank you.